All right, I'm Robert Dyan. I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon. Welcome to the National Competition for We the People. I teach American government at the University of Evansville, and I'll let the other judges introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. And my name is Zach Eastburn. I'm a commercial litigator from Madison, Wisconsin.
And good afternoon. My name is Tom Tinder, and I'm an attorney from Charleston, West Virginia.
And if you could take a moment and introduce yourselves, that would be terrific.
Hi, we're Maine South's Unit 4. Our esteemed coaches are Andrew Trinkle and Kevin C. Hansen. I'm Jackie Honan.
I'm Nicole Trushvich.
I'm Molly Devlin.
And I'm Kristen Meyer. Thank you for having us today.
Okay, well, as you've heard, this is Unit 4, and we're going to ask you question 1 today, the one about pardon power. I'll read it to you, and then we're eager to hear what you have to say. And it starts with a quote. It says, "It would be inconsistent with the constitutional separation of the executive and legislative powers to let the prerogative be exercised by the latter. What were the framers' reasons for giving the president the pardon power, and do you agree or disagree with them? According to the framer James Wilson, if the president abuses the pardon power, he can be impeached and prosecuted. Do you agree with Wilson? Why or why not? And in your opinion, what constitutes high crimes and misdemeanors?"
In Federalist Number 74, Hamilton wrote, "The criminal code of every country partakes so much of necessary severity that without easy access to exceptions in favor of unfortunate guilt, justice would wear a countenance too sanguinary and cruel."
Serving as a check on the judiciary, the presidential pardon power is an act of mercy, as in the case of President Carter's pardoning of 200,000 draft evaders. We agree that the pardon, despite obvious political motivations, is essential to maintaining justice in the judicial system.
The founders included the presidential pardon to prevent the miscarriage of justice. The prerogative of mercy is deeply rooted in English history, serving as an imperative check on the judicial branch. Article 2, Section 2 states the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. In Federalist 74, Hamilton argued that the pardon power can be an essential tool during times of insurrection, as used by Lincoln during the Civil War.
The legislative branch would violate the principle of separation of powers if it were able to approve presidential pardons. Although there were calls for Senate approval, those efforts were thwarted. As Rufus King stated, quote, "Congress was governed too much by the passions of the moment." In addition, Hamilton deemed that the pardon power should be purely presidential, as, quote, "one man appears a more eligible dispenser of the mercy of government than a body of men."
Congress does possess some tools to address the circumstances of a pardon, including oversight or impeachment. However, as seen in Ex parte Garland in 1866, the president has sweeping authority, and Congress therefore lacks authority to check certain pardons.
Recently, as the anti-federalists predicted, the pardon power has become more partisan, as it can be used to pardon political allies or controversial figures, such as President Trump's pardon of Dinesh D'Souza. In recent times, with presidents such as Trump and Clinton, pardons have bypassed the typical judicial department process, which requires the petitioner to have, quote, "demonstrated good conduct for a substantial period of time after conviction and service of sentence."
Although we agree that a president can and should be impeached if a pardon abuses the office of the president, impeachment is ineffective. Also, a large number of presidential pardons are issued at the end of a presidency.
For example, 80% of President Trump's pardons were issued in his last months in office. Therefore, Congress has a slim window to evaluate if a president abused the pardon power. In addition, impeachment, along with the pardon power, has become increasingly more political. Although the founders envisioned impeachment to, quote, "seldom fail to agitate the passions of the whole community," the last 3 impeachments have failed to gain the bipartisan support needed to convict on a 2/3 majority, as designated by Article 1, Section 3.
Under Article 2, Section 4, high crimes and misdemeanors refers to an official's betrayal of public trust, leading to a united call for impeachment. Specifically, this includes malpractice, neglect of duty, and corruption. According to Hamilton and Federalist 65, impeachable offenses, quote, "proceed from the misconduct of public men, or in other words, from the abuse or violation of some public trust."
Also, a betrayal of public interest has been interpreted as an abuse of office, such as in the impeachments of President Clinton and President Trump. In relation to pardons, the Supreme Court has interpreted the power to be plenary, as only 2 textual limitations exist, along with some other narrow restrictions. Therefore, many pardons fail to fit the definition of high crimes and misdemeanors. However, pardons that undermine democracy and abuse the office of the president would ideally result in impeachment despite its ineffectiveness.
The pardon power best placed in the hands of the president is essential because of its noble purpose of mercy. Although the largely unfettered power can be exploited and abused politically, the alternative of a merciless nation plagued by a lack of checks is more offensive to liberty.
As Abraham Lincoln said, I've always found that mercy bears richer fruits than strict justice. Thank you. We are now open for questions.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry about getting started late, but you stepped up to the plate and did a nice job. I'm intrigued by the notion that you raised the idea that if the Senate had a say in pardons, that would violate the separation of powers. And how do you square such an idea with the confirmation process or the treaty ratification process? Are those things in and of themselves a violation of the separation of powers?
I would argue that those things that you mentioned are not a violation of the separation of powers because they ensure the balance of power. However, with the pardon power, as several founders stated, that it would be a great danger to liberty. As Edmund Randolph stated in the North Carolina ratification debates, it would be a great danger to liberty if the Congress can control the pardon power as it's been historically held by a executive on their own, as with the King of England. And it's one of the unique threads of the American presidency, as Akil Reed Ahmad stated, because the states actually required the legislative approval that you're talking about. So although that those powers that you mentioned with approval ensure that the president does not have sweeping authority, the pardon power is essential to maintain mercy in our government.
In addition, the pardon power is given to the president in Article 2, Section 2, and nowhere else in the Constitution does it give Congress any power. And I think that's a good thing because I truly believe if Congress was involved in making pardons, it would become a lot more political and not a lot of pardons would be passed. And that defeats the whole purpose of giving people mercy. Also, U.S. v. Klein stated that Congress cannot overturn a presidential pardon because it will be a violation of the separation of powers. And I believe the only really check we have on the pardons is our election process. We vote for our president and we entrust in him or her to make the right decisions. And that includes making the correct pardons.
Additionally, in Federalist 74, Hamilton argued against congressional approval of pardons, stating that one man deems a more eligible dispenser of mercy than a body of men, as men derive their confidence in numbers.
I agree with my colleagues. Pardons are often very controversial, which means that they would be very hindered if they had to be approved by Congress or if Congress could block them. We know that George Washington pardoned several members of the Whiskey Rebellion, and other members of government at the time didn't agree with him, notably Alexander Hamilton. And if another branch was able to check that, they might have been able to block that pardon, but it ended up being a symbol of unity going forward.
So I understand thank you for that. I understand it seems like a somewhat unified approach here from the unit that the checks on the pardon power would be maybe not so good, and that the dangers of having a system that's plagued by a lack of checks on the judiciary would be worse. But let's talk about kind of the reverse of that. What are the dangers of an unchecked pardon power, and how do you handle that?
Well, the dangers of an unchecked pardon power have been seen over the last 200 years of American history. It's the politicalization of it. Thomas Jefferson pardoned all the people who were convicted against the Sedition Act. And even all the way up to our previous president, President Trump, he pardoned his close allies, such as Roger Stone and Paul Manafort. So those close allies ultimately create a pardon that, as the Anti-Federalists feared, as creating an aristocracy that is above the law. But as we've seen with President Trump's pardons, Congress has introduced several other mitigation measures, such as Adam Schiff introduced legislation that would require the Justice Department to hand over all documents that relate to a pardon that involved the president or an investigation of one of their family members. So there are ways that, although there is dangers to the politicalization of it, there are ways that Congress can improve transparency and try to check the pardon.
Additionally, the pardon power isn't entirely uncheckable. James Madison believed that if a pardon abuses the office of the president, they could be impeached. Although we mentioned that impeachment is ineffective, ideally it would result in that. And the other check on the pardon power would be the people. So if the president abuses a pardon, then the people could vote the president out in the next election. But additionally, even a check on the pardon power would be very difficult. As we mentioned, the majority of pardons occur at the end of a presidency. For example, around 80% of Trump's pardons occurred in the final fiscal year in office, so from October 1st to January 20th. And it was about 60% for Obama as well.
Let me follow up on your comments about the pardon, and you mentioned about Trump and Clinton, and you also made the comment about Representative Schiff introducing some legislation. And in prior presidencies, there was a procedure, I guess, going through the Justice Department and so forth. Should we have some sort of set procedure, whether it's a law or some executive order or something by a president that sets up a specific procedure with time limits and qualifications and check the boxes that have to be done before a pardon can be granted? Are you in favor of such a system or not, and why?
I would argue for the establishment of a pardon of our office separate of the Department of Justice. It was the Department of Justice moved the pardon office into the same department that handles the prosecutions. So instead of seeing pardons that promote mercy as a worthy pardon, people who make recommendations often see as a challenge against their administration of the laws. So by creating a separate pardon office that institutes several different recommendations and qualifications, I believe that could help promote the mercy of government rather than the politicization of the pardon.
I don't think there should be a time limit for pardons, despite the danger for pardons at the end of a president's term. We've seen from President Trump's second impeachment that the threat of impeachment investigations going beyond the end of the presidency itself are possible. So it wouldn't be a case where a president doesn't have to fear impeachment if he exercises the pardon power and abuses it.
I would not agree with any more limitations on the pardon power. One example of that is that pardons can be very timely, as certain individuals can be on death row. For example, Obama pardoned Stephen Arlington, who was on death row for 27 years and was waiting his sentence, and he commuted his sentence to life in prison.
Can finish your thought if you need to.
And so pardons can be extremely timely, and any restrictions on that would interfere with mercy.
All right, thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I was taking notes furiously, and the first thought is that if you're the first team of the day for us, we're off to a terrific start. I thought you did a really good job. I would love to continue talking about this with you for the rest of the afternoon, but we're going to move on. You hit a lot of the notes that I was expecting a good team to hit, and you anticipated some of the questions that we were going to ask you, and that's always a sign of a good team. I like the fact that you quoted Hamilton from Federalist 74. That's the one that you would necessarily go to. For what it's worth, this is kind of a snarky point, but Hamilton argues that there can't be legislative involvement with the pardon, But if in Philadelphia they had said the Senate must be involved in pardon power, he would have argued in favor of that. Hamilton was basically arguing in favor of whatever ended up in the final document was, absolutely in need of being ratified. Sometimes the Federalist Papers are an overzealous sales job, in my view. So it's a good source to be sure, but one wonders sometimes how sincere some of the argumentation is. But that, again, that's just a snarky point. I loved your examples. I love the way you said there is a technique to rein in abusive pardons, and that's the impeachment power. But in your presentation, you said that's largely ineffective because, well, for the reasons that you went into, and I won't rehearse those. I'll pass it along to Zach.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. And yeah, I just want to echo a few things. This is, our first of the day, and so it's always great to have. Great and not great, because you guys have set a great bar, and so thank you for that. I really think, from a technical standpoint, I feel like you guys spread it around your panel. It's a little bit hard on my screen to see, but I was following along, and you guys kind of did a good job of that. I, from a substantive standpoint, appreciated the nod or the mention or the explanation of the ex parte Garland decision. I think that's an important one for judicial review purposes, and we have a few legal practitioners on the call, and anyone can know, and I'm sure you guys do, that you can have 3 people in a room and 6 different opinions on what a Supreme Court case can say. So that was a good explanation of that. One thing that I like to see, and you guys did some of this with some of the follow-up questions, but maybe something to consider more, is sort of the point counterpoint. If someone asks you a question, let's take a position on X issue, and I think Tom did this with his last question. You guys did it really well. And sometimes it's hard to sort of, if maybe you all agree on certain issues, but to say, well, yeah, I agree with this, and I think there should be limits on the pardon power, and here's what we think we should do. And then someone else on the panel might say, well, no, I don't think that there should be any limits on it. That works just fine the way it is. Or like there was an example about the high profile death penalty cases. We can't have limits on that, So I think in the beginning, I would have liked to have seen more of that. But towards the end, you guys got there. And so, I like to see that because this is all about critical thinking, and, there's lots of different viewpoints on these types of things. So, but, just to tie it up, you guys touched on, reforms on the pardon power, some good Supreme Court cases, or at least the one, and then, some of the founding documents as well. So overall, great job, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd just add very quickly that, you answered the questions that Robert posed to you initially, and that's important. Sometimes teams don't answer those questions. They have what they want to say, and they just go off on their own tangents. You did that very well. You were an excellent team about how you played off one another, and I really liked all the historical facts that you provided to us, as well as the cases. I must tell you, from a personal standpoint, I'm a little disappointed that we didn't have more time, because I would have liked to have had the same conversation with you and ask questions about impeachment. You really did a tremendous job as it related to pardon, but I wish we would have had more time to get your insight and your opinions on the impeachment issue. But the most important thing is that you need to stay involved. You're good citizens now. You're outstanding with your knowledge and your desire, hopefully, to be involved in being a good citizen. And please don't let this be just one program or one class assignment or one activity that you did this semester. Please continue to stay involved and to continue to be good citizens. Overall, I thought you did a very good job. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.